Hello and welcome to today's Daily News Simplified. Today we are going to take up topics from the Hindu Delhi edition dated 25th July 2023. The topics which we are going to discuss have been displayed on the screen and a timestamping of the same has been provided in the description box below. So now let us begin our today's session. So this is the first topic today which we are going to discuss in the beginning of the session. The topic reads semiconductors. What exactly is India going to manufacture? So as we all are aware about the fact that recently India is investing, it is trying to focusing on tapping the potential of semiconductor manufacturing within the domestic boundaries. But the immediate context in which this news article has appeared in Science and Tech section is that recently a Foxconn technology group has withdrawn its support from its joint venture with Vedanta Limited. So Vedanta and Foxconn were jointly trying to establish a semiconductor manufacturing plant in Gujarat. This could have given a significant boost to India's domestic plans also. But however, in this major setback, Foxconn technology has withdrawn its support. So this topic is primarily relevant from two perspectives. One is General Studies Mains Paper 1. Second is General Studies Mains Paper 3. In paper 3, there is a section of Science and Tech where the question related to semiconductors can be asked. In General Studies Mains Paper 1, we have a specific section to Geography which mentions the locational factors for industrial distribution. So under this particular topic, these things are also important, and that is why in today's session, we are going to discuss the semiconductor manufacturing and the related aspects from the perspective of General Studies Mains Paper 1. So today we will be discussing that what are the important locational factors for a semiconductor manufacturing industry. But before that, first we should understand that what do we exactly mean by semiconductors? What are semiconductors? We all know from our basic sciences that metals have the highest conductivity. On the other hand, insulators completely prohibit any type of conduction. So insulators are at one extreme, metals are at the other extreme. In between them lies the semiconductors, as the name is also suggesting you that there is a conductivity, but it is relatively semi, that is lower than metals, higher than insulators. So these are semiconductors. How they are constructed or how they are made? They can be made on the basis of two types of materials. First, either they can be made with the help of pure elements, for example silicon or germanium. They can also be made with the help of compounds, that is gallium and arsenide, etc. However, an important thing is that there is one process during the construction of semiconductor which is known as doping. Doping is basically the addition of impurities in the pure elements, which means that if we are making these semiconductors out of the pure elements, then the elements are added with certain amount of impurities, and these impurities basically change the conductivity. They alter the characteristics of these elements and provide them the necessary characteristics which a semiconductor requires. For example, low weight, higher efficiency, better conductivity, etc. And this whole process is known as doping. So in this regard, now we shall come to our main topic, that is what are the various locational factors for a semiconductor manufacturing industry. So first important factor is the cost. Now, we know that whenever we discuss the locational factors for any industries, the raw material is one of the most important locational factor, right? But because the semiconductor manufacturing industry is being developed in recent times, whereby the dependence on raw material has relatively reduced and the other locational factors like cost, workforce, transportation, etc. have relatively increased. And there is a reason for this. The reason is that the raw materials which we require to make a semiconductors, many of those raw materials belong to the group of either the critical minerals or the strategic minerals. Most of these countries in the world are lacking in these minerals, but they cannot remain behind the other countries when it comes to the semiconductor manufacturing industry, because this is one of the most critical industries in today's times. but they are not having the raw material for this. So that is why they depend on the import of these raw materials from those countries which are rich in it. And that is why, because they cannot grow the raw materials and they are more relying on the imports, so that is why now it is an established fact that transportation becomes a very important locational factor, right? So first we'll discuss the cost. Now costs are primarily of three types when it comes to the semiconductor manufacturing industry. One is the labor cost, operations cost, as well as services cost. Now because in this line we should also understand the other locational factor, that is workforce. Now because technically skilled workforce is required, and that is why the labor cost increases when it comes to the establishment of these industries. Also, because it requires a huge amount of automation, the operational as well as services cost also increased. When it comes to the technically skilled workforce, so not only the engineers, but because these industries are so diverse, we also require lawyers, accountants, CAs, etc. So we should not restrict while thinking about these industries to only the engineers, to the people who are just directly related to the, let's say, manufacturing of chips. But we should also be knowing the fact that other types of workforce are also required. The third important factor is transportation. We just discussed that how transportation plays its role during the import as well as export of such raw materials. Also, the forward as well as backward linkages become very important when it comes to connecting the sites of raw material to the industries further down to the markets. So these forward backward linkages again are important, and that is why the transportation, which may be via rails, roads, waterways, airways, etc., any mode of transportation can play its role. Next, come down to the infrastructure. Now this infrastructure point is also very important. Infrastructure in terms of electricity, water, internet access, etc. All such types of physical as well as digital infrastructure is required for these industries. Next point is market, one of the very important locational factor. And this market can be domestic as well as it can be foreign markets. Now, if you closely look at this diagram, you will see that there are certain key growth drivers of these industries which are directly related to the market. We know that today the dependence on internet and internet related services have grown. For example, Internet of Things. So that is why the market potential for these industries have drastically increased. Now, various industrial as well as service sectors, for example, wireless communication technologies for like 5G, automotive technologies, artificial intelligence, deep learning, electronics, data centers, cloud computing, etc. All these require the semiconductor industries. Similarly, the power technologies, industrial equipments, security, for example, biometrics, medical devices, robotics, wireline communication. The thing is that today the digital services are becoming so important in our lives that the market potential of semiconductor industries have grown, because semiconductor industries play an important role when it comes to the chip making. Also, semiconductor industries are very important when it comes to the strategic advantage for any country. So that is why such industries not only have economic advantages, but they also have political as well as strategic advantages. So that is the role of market in the location of the semiconductor industries. The areas which are having higher market, the industries will be set up more near to those areas. Last point is the government policies, that how the government is promoting such type of industries. For example, in countries or in regions where governments are providing subsidies, or it is providing tax reliefs, or it is setting up an infrastructure, it is attracting the investment. So obviously those areas will be more favorable to locate the semiconductor industry. So these are certain locational factors. However, when it comes to India, there are certain challenges as well. So in this line, we should also discuss the challenges associated with semiconductor industry. The first and the foremost challenge is the high cost of establishment. For example, the data suggests that in India, on an average, just to establish one chip fabrication unit, the total cost which is involved is around 5 to 7 billion dollars. So because it is one of the most capital intensive industry, it will require a huge amount of investment not only from the public sector but also from the private players. So first, high cost of establishment is the challenge. Second, if we understand that a huge amount of investment is required, but if the country is not able to provide ease of doing business, then we will not be able to attract investors. So from where the money will come? Because in India, still such industries require multiple clearances, and there is a reason for this also. Semiconductor industries also have a very great negative impact on the pollution. Why? Because see, you yourself imagine that the things which are used as a raw material in such industries are silicon, mercury, germanium, cadmium, copper, etc. And we know that all these things, if they are not managed properly and somehow they enter into either the water or the soil, they can have a very large negative impact in disturbing the biodiversity. So, just in the environmental sense, also a huge number of clearances are required. Similarly, if you are going to establish industry on a particular land, then the clearance is required for the areas. There might be certain amount of deforestation or rehabilitation, etc. So low ease of doing business in India is also the challenge. Next comes the technological constraints. Till now we have understood that semiconductor industries is one of the most technology oriented industries, but still most of the processes as well as the products have been patented. So when there are patents, so one cannot establish the semiconductor industry in a very easy manner. They have to take permissions or they have to pay higher cost for this. So there are certain technological constraints. Also, India's investment in research and development is far below than the countries like China, US, Japan, South Korea, etc. So on one hand, we are not investing in R&D. On the other hand, the when we are going to take permissions from the patent holders, our cost is increasing. Next comes the structural as well as policy constraints. For example, still out of total FDI, only 1% comes in the electronics sector. Despite the fact that we have given 100% of the FDI in this sector under automotive route. So this is an issue. And why there is a low FDI? Why we are not able to attract foreign investments? The reason is land acquisition challenges, complex tax regimes, etc. So you have to understand that these factors, all these challenges are not operating in isolation. They are connected. One is the cause and one is the effect of each other. Next challenge is the unstable power supply. Still, in many regions, we are not able to provide continuous electricity for 24 hours. So these are certain challenges which are not allowing India to tap its real potential. In this regard, from the current affairs, an important topic emerges: India Semiconductor Mission. So we should be aware about the factual details about the India's semiconductor mission. So mission has been set up as an independent business division within the Digital India Corporation. So there are 6 objectives of this mission. First is to build a vibrant semiconductor and display design and innovation ecosystem to enable India's emergence as a global hub for electronics manufacturing and design. So basically this objective is telling you the basic goal of India and what is the ambition which India is having in relation to the semiconductor industry. Second is Importance to organize efforts for promoting the semiconductors and display industry, enabling a multi-fold growth of Indian semiconductor design industry, facilitating indigenous intellectual property generations so that the patent lies within India, incentivizing the transfer of technologies so that we can get the technologies under the bilateral regional agreements at a lower cost, enabling the collaborations and partnership programs with the national as well as the international agencies. So these are certain objectives of Indian semiconductor mission. Under Atmanirbharta government approved Semicon India program, which is in a short form also known as SIP, with a total outlay of INR 76,000 crore, it aims to provide the financial support to companies investing in semiconductors. So this Semicon India program SIP is also important. And this SIP further has four sub schemes in it. So basically, obviously, all these sub schemes are also related to the important components of the semiconductor industry. For example, semiconductor fabrication units, display fabrication units, etc. Right. So these were the factual details regarding Indian semiconductor mission. This topic has appeared in today's editorial section. The topic reads still incomplete. This topic is in the context of the Indo-Sri Lankan international or the bilateral relationship and has appeared in today's The Hindu newspaper because of the immediate context of the joint statement being signed between India and Sri Lanka. That joint statement is entitled Promoting Connectivity, Catalyzing Prosperity, India-Sri Lanka Economic Partnership Vision. So this has been signed between India and Sri Lanka. Basically, the five key areas where there is going to be cooperation is released in this statement, and those five key areas are maritime, air, energy, trade, and people to people initiatives. So this brings us to an important point that we need to be aware about the various dynamics associated in the context of the bilateral relation between India as well as Sri Lanka. So to understand all the possible dimensions between India and Sri Lanka bilateral relation, we shall be looking forward for a detailed discussion by Mr. Vaibhav Mishra in this very context.
So let us now begin the discussion by first understanding the areas of cooperation between India and Sri Lanka. So as far as the areas of cooperation are concerned, there are four clear areas, which are trade, culture, development projects, and strategic partnerships. Now to start with the trade. Sri Lanka is one of the India's largest trading partner in SAARC. India in turn is Sri Lanka's largest trade partner globally. Now apart from good trading relations, India already has a free trade agreement with Sri Lanka which was signed in 2000. And right now the two countries are negotiating economic and technological cooperation agreement which would be FTA plus. Now as far as the next dimension of cooperation is concerned, culture is something which is very important in case of India and Sri Lanka. Buddhism, spread by Ashoka in Sri Lanka, is one of the strong pillars connecting both the nations, which originated in India and then spread to Sri Lanka. The other important binding link between India and Sri Lanka as far as religion goes is Hinduism. Not only a significant minority group of Tamilians are Hindus, but also the prominent mention of Sri Lanka island in the epic of Ramayana ensures that a lot of Hindus go for pilgrim to the important religious sites mentioned in the epic of Ramayana. Then if we talk about the development aspect of areas of cooperation, Sri Lanka plays a very crucial role in India's development as it provides the facility of transshipment from the ports like Colombo and Hambantota, which handle huge cargo that comes to India. And the reason is that India has not been able to fully develop a transshipment port along the southern coast. Then apart from that, India has been carrying out a lot of development projects in Sri Lanka. For example, India's housing projects and railway construction in the Jaffna or the northeastern part of Sri Lanka to help the war-torn region. Then the next important area of cooperation is strategic cooperation. And if you know, you would appreciate that India and Sri Lanka hold common membership of three important groups: SAARC, BIMSTEC, and Indian Ocean Rim Association. And apart from that, Sri Lanka is also important for India in its ambitions to become net security provider in Indian Ocean. And so pursuing strong ties with Sri Lanka is an integral part of India's neighborhood first policy. But analyzing the events of past 10 to 20 years, India and Sri Lanka relationship face very significant challenges, which can be categorized into four different groups. One is, of course, the Chinese factor, which is always there whenever we talk about India and its neighborhood relations. Then there is a peculiar case of ethnic issue in Sri Lanka. Then the issues of fishermen and stalled infra projects or inability of the India to complete infrastructural projects or to compete with China as far as construction of novel projects in Sri Lanka is concerned. So let us now have a look at each one of them one by one. So whenever we talk about the challenges and we talk about Chinese influence in Sri Lanka's internal and external matters, there are four important events which we recall. For example, scrapping of Indian infrastructure projects like Colombo East Container Port Terminal at a time when China is increasing its investment in same Colombo port city. Then recently Sri Lanka gave approval to Chinese funded Colombo port city with some autonomy. Apart from that, we already know that China had developed Hambantota port, which was later leased to it for a period of 99 years because the Sri Lanka was unable to repay the loans on the debts it had from China. And then Sri Lanka has also endorsed Belt and Road Initiative of China. So these are the factors which clearly indicate a decisive turn which Sri Lanka has taken as far as India and China is concerned. Then apart from the Chinese factor, the next important challenges which India and Sri Lanka face is that of ethnic issue. The long drawn ethnic conflicts and human rights violation of Tamils have always been a troublesome issue between the two. But even after that, the lack of proper rehabilitation and lack of implementation of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of Sri Lanka to the northern Tamil provinces have further strained the ties. Because this was the commitment of Sri Lanka to not just its own people but also to the Indian government. Then the next set of challenges come from fishermen, because of which we are discussing India-Sri Lanka relations. Sri Lankan fishermen object to Indians using bottom trawlers and fishing illegally along their coast, which often leads to arrests of Indians. Apart from that, the disputed status of the island of Kachativu is still not resolved and continues to be a problematic issue between India and Sri Lanka. Then the last major sticking point between India and Sri Lanka is the inability of India to get its infrastructural projects concluded and completed within time, be it Jaffna's hybrid energy project or be it Sampur power plant, both of which have not been completed, and in fact Sampur power project has been cancelled. This also includes a long list of infrastructural projects, for example East Container Terminal project, which was cancelled within last 3 months. And so this brings us to the issue how to go about India and Sri Lanka relations moving forward. What is the way forward so that we can resolve these issues? So moving forward, since India and Sri Lanka have close cultural ties, both countries should focus on deepening people to people contact. Apart from that, India should also insist on Sri Lanka to prioritize India's interest in defense as well as in geostrategic arena, which are non-compromisable. Then India should leverage strength of its economic relation with Sri Lanka, because we have seen that India is the largest trading partner of Sri Lanka in the South Asian region. And then resolving fishermen issue should be kept on priority, because this is what creates a domestic pressure on both the countries.
This topic has appeared at text and the context page in today's The Hindu Daily edition. As you can see, the topic is in relation to India's first gig workers' rights bill. Now, this bill has been passed by a state. Which is that state? Rajasthan. So basically, Rajasthan has become the first state to pass the Rajasthan Platform-Based Gig Workers Registration and Welfare Bill 2023. This is the first legislation of its kind in India, outlining the welfare schemes of the state's approximately 3 lakh gig workers. So in this very regard, from the perspective of examination, we should be aware that what are the key challenges which are faced by the gig workers. To understand the associated dimensions of this issue, we shall be looking forward for the discussion by Mr. Jatin Bhardwaj.
This article of the Hindu newspaper appeared as a part of Text and Context. Now, India is also one of the nations which has very high population and also going through the rise of platform and gig workers. Hence, India should also come up with the major policy support to these workers. Now, as per the Niti Aayog report, India as of now has around 77 lakh platform or gig workers who are recognized. The issue is that majority of them are not yet recognized. These workers are engaged in the gig economy and their number is going to be tripled by the end of this decade. Hence, from that perspective, it is required to have a dedicated policy and regulatory support to the platform workers in India. Now, who is a gig worker? According to the Code of Social Security 2020, a gig worker is that person who performs or participate in a work arrangement. Arrangement here means a relation between the employer and employee. And that person earns from such activity outside the traditional employer-employee relationship. Now, what is this traditional relation? Traditional relation is the one where the employer and employee sit under the same roof, they work together, there is a salary related relation between the employer and the employee, there is a perfect task that an employer has to do, they are binded by a particular work, they have a contract maybe for a longer period of time. For example, in the government job, there is a contract where there is a job security. So all these traditional means are absent. Over here, in a gig economy, the employer and the employee have a very indirect relationship. They sometimes don't even meet with each other. And the work which they are performing is mostly temporary in nature. There is no long-term contract between them. Wages which are paid are not based on the monthly basis, it is based on the target or a particular objective basis. Hence, whatever the person is working outside the traditional employer-employee relation and earns a particular money for a work arrangement is called a gig worker. As of now, the best example, as you can see on the screen, are the online food chain providers. For example, Swiggy or Zomato. The gig worker can further be divided into two. The first is the platform worker and the second one is the non-platform worker. Platform here simply means through the online softwares or the application in the digital platform. So whether you talk about Zomato, whether you talk about Swiggy or Ola, Uber cab providers, all of them are the platform workers. On the other hand, there are non-platform workers. They are the casual wage workers. They have a target, let's say video editing. So they will work on a casual wage. There might be a person who work as a freelancer for a furniture shop or a freelancer teacher or a freelancer artist. So all those are working on the casual wages. They have their own account and work in the conventional sector, which are outside the digital platform. Now, there are certain reasons which have led to the rise of gig workers or the gig economy. The first one is, of course, the expansion of the platform, which is the digitalization. According to the Internet and Mobile Association of India, in the next 3 years, India will have 900 million, that is almost 90 crore internet users. More internet users simply proves that there is going to be more e-commerce, digital payments, digital based gig economy. So more people are going to order food online, they are going to order cab service online. There are low barriers on the gig economy. So a person who is working can work from anywhere. They can work from home. They can easily monetize their skills. And there is no hard and fast contractual relation between the employer and the employee. There is a flexible hiring which reduces the cost and time in the hiring process, training process. Most of the gig workers already are trained in a particular activity or a skill. There's a flexibility because this economy offers more time to a labor to learn particular skill. So a person who is working in a gig sector or in a gig economy will be working as a part-time worker. So on the rest of the day, that person can gain more skills than what a traditional worker would do. Now, as the gig economy is expanding, so are the challenges. So, there are numerous challenges which are faced by gig worker, and the top of them is the social security absence. No benefits are provided to these laborers with respect to wages, hours, working conditions, and their collective rights. So they can be hired anytime, they can be fired anytime. They don't have occupational safety or health risk. As you can easily see that most of the cab drivers or bike riders, they don't have insurance, health insurance, or in fact the accidental insurance. So their occupational safety, according to the International Labour Organization, are highly compromised. Especially those who are working in the taxi and the delivery sector, particularly the women. They have a very high risk towards occupation, safety and health. When we talk about the algorithmic control, so the rating based reputation system that every worker should be provided 5 star, 4 star, the cab driver should be rated by the customer, and sometimes on their personal grudge, poor rating might deteriorate the career of a cab driver or even the food delivery person. There is a skill mismatch. According to the ILO survey, workers with higher educational achievements are not necessarily finding a good job where they can utilize their skills on the particular platform. And lastly, there is a poor accessibility. Platform workers can only work if they have access to these internet services and the digital technology. And in this regard, rural sector in India, where majority of the population resides, goes into the losses. So the employment generation with respect to gig worker remains morely confined to the urban center rather than the rural areas. So what should we do? As far as way forwards are concerned, so the first is that tax benefits to such workers should be provided. And this tax benefit could be in the possibility of income tax benefits. The Code for Social Security 2020 provides for the basic registration of all the gig workers. But on ground, the work has not been very promising. They can be provided third party insurance. So here, let's say the first party is Zomato, the second party is delivery man, and the third party is the insurance company. So together these three can combine and provide basic insurance services such as health insurance, accidental insurance, or even the life insurance to the particular platform worker. If they are working on the rating system, then a right to improve should be given to a particular gig worker before firing that person. Rights of a consumer who is availing the service and the rights of gig worker who is providing the service should be balanced. It should not be on the profit motive. When we talk about the gender based rights, women's security, maternity benefits should be ensured. On the safety ground, human angle should take the priority and not the profit margin and not the benefits to the service provider. Minimum sustainable wages, be it any person, should be provided irrespective of where they are working and how they are working. And lastly, if they have any grievances, those grievances should be addressed by a specific authority where government should also be the stakeholder.